Emily Hart was the kind of girl everyone trusted, and Thomas Monroe was the kind of man who made sure no one ever questioned him. Until their two worlds collided in a way that ended in betrayal, obsession, and murder. 17-year-old Emily Hart had always been described as dependable beyond her years. In the quiet, tree-lined suburb of Maple Glen, she wasn't just another teenager, she was a favorite among families in need of childcare. Neighbors trusted her, kids adored her, parents praised her. She maintained straight A's in school, volunteered at the local library, and never gave anyone a reason to worry. Emily wasn't just a babysitter, she was the kind of girl everyone assumed would grow up to do something great. The Monroe family was one of the first to notice Emily's quiet reliability. When they moved into the upscale neighborhood a year earlier, they were drawn to her polite demeanor and calm confidence. With two young children, 5-year-old Hannah and 3-year-old Cole, they were in constant need of help. Mrs. Monroe was a real estate agent with a busy schedule, and Mr. Monroe was a financial consultant who often worked late. Emily quickly became their go-to sitter. She was available almost every Friday night and sometimes on weekends if the couple had events or traveled out of town. It wasn't long before she had her own key to their home and full access to everything she needed. The Monroes treated her like extended family, and Emily treated the children as if they were her own siblings. Emily took pride in her work. She arrived early, stayed late, and never complained. She kept the kids on a routine, helped with homework, played games, and read bedtime stories. She left notes for the parents with updates on how the evening went. She tidied up the toys and washed any dishes left in the sink. The Monroes often praised her for being more mature than most adults. In return, Emily appreciated their generosity. They paid well, left snacks for her, and always checked in to make sure she felt comfortable. To outsiders, the Monroes seemed like the perfect couple. Attractive, successful, and affectionate in public, they attended neighborhood parties together, waved at neighbors from their driveway, and hosted elaborate birthday parties for their children. They gave off the appearance of a strong, happy household. Emily believed it too, for a while. As the weeks passed, however, subtle inconsistencies began to catch her attention. Nothing overt or alarming, just small things that lingered in the back of her mind. A men's watch left in the bathroom that didn't belong to Mr. Monroe, a second phone on the kitchen counter that disappeared the next day, an empty wine glass on the patio when no one was supposed to be home. She pushed these things aside at first. People were complicated. Maybe it was nothing. Then came the night she noticed a faint lipstick smudge on a glass in the office, even though Mrs. Monroe rarely wore makeup and never drank in that room. The Monroe house was large, sleek, and always clean, which made anything out of place stand out more. It wasn't messy clutter that caught Emily's eye, it was the presence of something that didn't belong, the feeling that someone had been there who shouldn't have been. Still, she didn't say anything. She had no proof of anything wrong. Maybe she was overthinking it. Maybe her imagination was getting the best of her. But that feeling that something wasn't quite right began to grow stronger each time she visited. One Friday evening, while the children were asleep, Emily wandered into the home office looking for crayons that Cole had left behind earlier in the day. The desk was unlocked, and as she opened the top drawer, she noticed a folder that didn't look like the usual business papers Mr. Monroe kept there. Out of curiosity, she flipped it open. Inside was a printout of several emails, intimate, romantic, and written in a tone that immediately made her stomach turn. The sender's name was only listed as L, but the messages made it clear they were from someone who wasn't his wife. The dates were recent, and the language was unmistakably personal. Emily froze. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an affair. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The glass, the jacket, the late-night noises, the second phone. She realized she knew something she wasn't supposed to know. She closed the drawer and left the office quickly, heart pounding, eyes wide. She had always thought the Monroe's life was a polished picture of suburban perfection, but now she had seen behind the curtain, and she couldn't unsee it. It started with the jacket, a sleek black one, obviously a man's, left draped over the arm of the living room couch. Emily noticed it while tidying up after putting the children to bed. She had never seen Mr. Monroe wear it before, and he was always meticulous about his clothes, either hung up or folded neatly away. Something about the way it was carelessly left out struck her as odd, especially since the Monroes weren't even home when she arrived that evening, though she struck her as alarming, and though it was the teen, she folded it, placed it over a chair, and let it go. But the little things kept adding up. A week later, she discovered an earring on the kitchen counter. It was gold, delicate, and not something she'd ever seen on Mrs. Monroe. Emily placed it in a small bowl near the coffee machine, assuming it had been misplaced. When she returned the following Friday, the earring was gone. Mrs. Monroe didn't mention it. That same night, while reaching for a book on the top shelf in the guest bedroom closet, Emily's hand brushed against something smooth and hard in the dark. She pulled it down and found a small bottle of perfume tucked behind some old winter coats. The label was unfamiliar and not the kind Mrs. Monroe typically wore. The scent was bold, floral. Too different to be a coincidence. Emily told herself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it belonged to a friend. Maybe Mrs. Monroe was trying something new. But the nagging suspicion in her mind refused to quiet. She started paying closer attention. She noticed subtle things: a lipstick stain on a glass in the sink, a strand of long, dark hair on a pillow, the way the bedroom curtains were occasionally drawn shut when they were always left open before. All of it suggested that someone else had been in the house. Someone who came and went when the Monroes weren't around, or when they believed no one was watching. Then came the night she heard the voice. Emily was sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone while the children slept upstairs. The house was quiet, except for the soft hum of the dishwasher, and then, from somewhere near the back of the house, she heard a faint sound, muffled but unmistakably a person speaking. A man. At first she thought the Monroes had returned early. She got up and walked toward the kitchen, but no one was there. The voice had stopped. She checked the front door. Still locked. She peered out the windows. No car in the driveway. Everything was still. She told herself she must have imagined it. The TV wasn't on, maybe a neighbor. She sat back down, but her nerves stayed alert. 10 minutes later, there was a soft thump upstairs. She paused. The kids should have been asleep. She climbed the stairs, moving quietly from room to room. Hannah was curled up in bed, undisturbed. Cole was snoring softly. There was nothing out of place, no window open, no shadow in the hallway, just silence and a feeling, an icy creeping sensation in her chest that she couldn't shake. The next morning she mentioned the thump to Mrs. Monroe in passing, brushing it off as likely the kids shifting in their sleep. Mrs. Monroe smiled and agreed, but something in her expression felt stiff, forced. Emily left the house with a knot in her stomach. Days later, she made a discovery that would change everything. In the office, while cleaning up scattered markers and coloring pages, she accidentally knocked over a stack of papers on the desk. As she gathered them, she noticed something tucked beneath the keyboard. An envelope containing more printed emails. She couldn't help herself. She opened it. They were love letters, digital ones, passionate and obsessive. The same sender as before, L. The tone had shifted from romantic to possessive. Phrases like, "She'll never understand us," and "I hate having to sneak around," made Emily's blood run cold. This wasn't just a casual affair. It was intense, dangerous, and it had been going on far longer than she initially thought. Worse yet, one of the emails mentioned her by name. The babysitter is always here. It's getting harder to keep things hidden. Emily's hands trembled as she folded the papers back and returned everything exactly as she'd found it. The reality of her situation sank in like a weight. She wasn't just a witness to a secret anymore, she was part of it, a threat. And someone out there knew she was getting too close. Emily Hart had never been the kind of girl who liked secrets, but now she was drowning in them. The emails she had found confirmed what she feared. Mr. Monroe was having a secret affair, and it was far from casual. It was emotional, obsessive, and dangerous. Worse still, whoever L was, knew about Emily. She had gone from an innocent babysitter to a potential liability, and she wasn't even sure what to do about it. Every instinct told her to tell someone, to come forward with what she'd seen. But who would believe her? The Monroes were respected, wealthy, and private. Emily was just the girl who watched their kids. She didn't want to seem like she was stirring up drama, especially without any proof beyond the emails. Still, the fear was growing. That weekend, Emily met her best friend Claire at a local cafe and after making her promise not to say a word, told her everything. From the jacket to the earring, from the voice in the house to the emails, she laid it all out. Claire listened in stunned silence, then asked the obvious question. What was Emily going to do? Emily didn't have an answer. She wasn't sure she wanted to get involved in the Monroes' personal mess, but she also didn't like keeping dangerous secrets, especially when children were involved. What if something more was happening beneath the surface? What if the woman from the emails wasn't just another affair, but someone unstable? Claire urged her to go to the police or at least talk to Mrs. Monroe, but Emily hesitated. She didn't want to blow up a family over something she wasn't even supposed to know. But after that conversation, things started to change quickly, and not in ways she expected. 2 days later, Emily began receiving text messages from an unknown number. The first was vague. "You should really mind your business." She stared at the message in disbelief, unsure if it was a prank. She didn't reply. The second came the next night. "You think you're smart, but you're not invisible." That time, her heart raced. She hadn't told anyone else besides Claire. Could it be coincidence, or was someone watching her? She showed the texts to Claire, who insisted she go to the police. Emily resisted again. She wasn't sure how to explain what she had without revealing how she got the information in the first place. Everything she knew came from snooping around someone else's house. The police might dismiss it as gossip. Worse, the Monroes might press charges for invasion of privacy. She deleted the messages and tried to convince herself they were just idle threats. On Friday evening, she showed up for her usual babysitting shift, trying to act like nothing was wrong. She forced a smile when Mr. Monroe handed her the house keys and pretended she didn't notice the quick glance he gave her, sharp, like he was studying her face. Mrs. Monroe wasn't home. She was running late, according to her husband. Emily nodded and kept quiet. The night was uneventful, at least on the surface. She played blocks with Cole, helped Hannah with her bedtime story, brushed their teeth and tucked them in with warm blankets. But her mind wasn't on the kids. It was on the woman from the emails. Who was Elle? Was she someone in the neighborhood? Someone close to the family? The more Emily thought about it, the more a terrifying idea took shape. After the kids were asleep, Emily opened her phone and typed a quick message to Claire. "I think I know who Elle is. It's someone close. I'll tell you everything when I'm out." She hit send and locked her phone. That message was the last thing she ever sent. The next morning, Emily's parents grew concerned when she didn't come home. At first, they assumed she had stayed the night, as she sometimes did. But by noon, their calls went unanswered. Her phone was off. When they drove to the Monroe house, Emily's car was still parked on the side of the street. The Monroes answered the door and calmly explained that she had left around midnight, saying she had something important to do. They assumed she had gone home. But Emily had never made it home. Her keys were gone, her purse was missing, and her phone had vanished. Claire immediately told the police about the messages Emily received and the email affair she had uncovered. That was when the search began, one that would grip the entire town and expose a terrifying truth no one was prepared to believe. Emily's disappearance sent shockwaves through Maple Glen. The tight-knit suburban community, where people left their doors unlocked and neighbors exchanged cookies at Christmas, suddenly felt like a place shadowed by dread. Flyers with her photo appeared on telephone poles and shop windows. Candlelight vigils were held in front of the high school. Friends and teachers spoke on the news, describing her as gentle, dependable, and deeply loved. But beneath the public mourning was something more chilling. A slow realization that something had gone terribly wrong, and that someone they knew might be responsible. Detectives launched an immediate investigation. Emily's parents were adamant that their daughter would never run away. She was responsible, punctual, and had no history of mental health struggles or risky behavior. Her car was still parked down the street from the Monroe home, locked, with her schoolbook still inside. There were no signs of a struggle inside the house, and both Mr. and Mrs. Monroe insisted they had no idea what had happened to her. They said she left just after midnight. They were asleep. They didn't hear anything. It wasn't unusual for her to leave quietly when staying late. But something didn't add up. Emily's phone was completely off the grid. No calls, no pings, no messages. Her bank account hadn't been touched. Her social media accounts remained inactive. Nothing in her room had been taken. No suitcase packed. No journal entries indicating plans to leave. She had simply vanished into thin air. Authorities searched nearby parks, drainage ditches, and wooded areas. Volunteers combed through fields and hiking trails, calling her name. Her best friend, Claire, repeated her story to police about the emails, the mysterious woman, Elle, and the threatening texts. Detectives took her seriously, especially when Claire showed them screenshots of Emily's last message. "I think I know who Elle is. It's someone close." Days turned into a week. A local jogger stumbled upon Emily's sneaker near the edge of the forest, about 2 miles outside of town. A search team was dispatched immediately. That same afternoon, in a shallow, hastily dug grave concealed beneath a patch of leaves and brush, they found her body. She was wearing the same clothes she'd worn to the Monroe house. Her face was bruised, her fingernails broken from scratching at the dirt. The coroner's report confirmed the horror. She had been alive when she was buried. The discovery stunned everyone. The community's golden girl had not run away. She had been murdered, buried alive in a remote area where someone thought she wouldn't be found. The police shifted from a missing persons investigation to a homicide case, and their focus narrowed. The last people to see her alive had been the Monroes. Detectives returned to the Monroe house with a warrant, this time treating it as a crime scene. They went through every room, dusted for prints, inspected carpets, vents, and the garage. They uncovered something they hadn't expected. Trace amounts of blood on the basement floor, faint but detectable with luminol. They also found a towel stuffed into the bottom of the laundry bin with a faint smear of red. It had been washed, but not well enough. The discovery opened a floodgate. A neighbor came forward and told police that she had seen Mr. Monroe carrying something large to his SUV late on the night Emily vanished. He claimed it was a box of old office supplies, but the neighbor remembered it clearly because he seemed rushed and nervous. Another resident reported hearing what sounded like a woman screaming faintly around midnight, but assumed it was teenagers being rowdy. Most damning of all, surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showed Mr. Monroe's SUV driving out of town at 2:14 a.m., the direction leading toward the woods where Emily was later found. When asked, he claimed he'd gone for a drive to clear his head after an argument with his wife. But his wife told detectives they had both gone to bed before midnight and hadn't spoken again that night. Under pressure, the story began to crack. The image of the perfect family started to disintegrate. Police now believed Emily had been murdered in the Monroe home, possibly in the basement, then transported and buried in the woods during the early morning hours. The only question left was who had actually committed the crime, and who had helped cover it up. The answer would come soon, and it would shock everyone. The truth finally unraveled like a frayed thread, slowly at first, then all at once. As investigators dug deeper into the Monroe family's life, the polished image they had so carefully crafted began to deteriorate. Neighbors were stunned as new details emerged about Lisa Monroe, Mrs. Monroe's younger sister, who had been quietly living in the guest house behind the main home for nearly 3 months. Most people in Maple Glen didn't even know she was there. The Monroes had told friends she was visiting for a brief stay after a rough breakup and needed some time to get back on her feet, but no one realized just how complicated and dangerous her presence had become. Lisa had arrived in Maple Glen the previous spring after leaving a failed relationship in another city. She was charming, intelligent, and striking in appearance, with a sharp wit and confidence that drew people in. At first, she was simply the quirky younger sister, spending her days lounging by the pool or shopping at the town center. But over time, her relationship with Mr. Monroe had crossed a line. Investigators discovered dozens of emails, text messages, and handwritten notes between them. Their affair had not only started months earlier, it had become deeply obsessive. Lisa had grown possessive, even unstable, writing increasingly desperate messages filled with jealousy and anger. She didn't want to be a secret anymore. She wanted a life with Mr. Monroe, and she was willing to do whatever it took to make that happen. When Emily stumbled across the affair, Lisa panicked. She knew the girl was smart and observant, and she feared that Emily's discovery would destroy everything. Mr. Monroe begged Lisa to stay calm, but she refused to be silenced. On the night of Emily's final babysitting shift, Lisa let herself into the main house while the children were sleeping. She waited downstairs, pacing, debating what to do. At some point, Emily came down the stairs, maybe for a glass of water or to check a sound, and found Lisa in the kitchen. No one knows exactly what was said in those final moments, but the confrontation quickly turned violent. There were signs of a struggle in the basement, scuff marks on the floor, a broken bracelet clasp, and a hairbrush that had belonged to Emily. According to prosecutors, Lisa struck Emily in the head with a heavy object during an argument, and believing she was dead, called Mr. Monroe in a panic. But Emily had not died instantly. Autopsy results confirmed she was still breathing when she was buried. Rather than calling for help, Mr. Monroe helped carry her body to his SUV, drove her deep into the woods, and left her there in a shallow grave, covering her with leaves and soil. He then returned home, showered, and went to bed beside his wife as though nothing had happened. Once the evidence became overwhelming, both Lisa and Mr. Monroe were arrested. At first, they each tried to pin the blame on the other. Lisa claimed Mr. Monroe forced her to keep quiet, threatening to turn her in if she didn't help cover it up. Mr. Monroe, in turn, claimed Lisa acted alone and that he was only trying to protect his family from scandal. But their electronic communication, texts, emails, and timestamps told a different story. They had planned to keep the affair going, even discussing the idea of Mrs. Monroe eventually finding out and accepting the truth. But Emily had gotten in the way. She had seen too much, and they believed she was expendable. The courtroom was packed the day their trial began. Friends, teachers, classmates, and neighbors filled the rows, stunned by the people they thought they knew. The jury took only 3 hours to convict both Lisa and Mr. Monroe of first-degree murder and conspiracy to conceal a crime. They were each sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the months that followed, the Monroe children were placed in the custody of their maternal grandparents, shielded from the media storm and the painful legacy left behind. The guest house was boarded up. The once immaculate yard became overgrown, and Emily Hart was laid to rest in the town's cemetery, her grave surrounded by flowers and notes from classmates who would never forget her. Maple Glen would never be the same. One quiet girl's discovery of a terrible secret had exposed the darkness hidden beneath a flawless suburban facade, and in the end, it had cost her everything.